Hey, it's Mr. Spencer. We're reviewing and summarizing chapters 61 to 70. Remember, you've got your book here to read all the details and to get the right answers on your reading guide. All right, the reading guide covered chapters 51 to 85 till the end of the book. And when we last left off in the reading guide, you should have seen that the soldiers and the guards for King Saren are about to invade and sneak attack the camp of diviners. Remember, Kwame, Zoo, okay, all of those are on its learning. You have the last plot summary to chapter 60 is on its learning. And there's Zoo, the picture I used there for that 13-year-old healer. Remember, Kwame is a burner. Okay, we start chapter 61. In the last chapter, Zane had abruptly stopped dancing with Amari as he saw Inan kissing his sister Zelie. Suddenly, the horns sound, and King Saren's men have arrived. Now, in Zelie's point of view, for chapter 61 here, the king's guards are yelling for them to give up Zelie and the scroll or die. Zu comes forward saying that they have neither, and they are simply gathered for a peaceful celebration. As Zu raises her hands in surrender, an arrow pierces Zu's body, and the guards begin their attack. They've killed that 13-year-old healer. Can't heal herself now. All right. The guards will not be reasoned with, resorting immediately to violence. They make it clear that the only option is to fight back. The king's guards cut down as many diviners as they can. Panicked, Zelie searches for Zane. A guard slashes down the defenseless young boy that Zelie danced with earlier. It's mayhem. Kwame, the burner, moves past Zelie and slashes open his palm, preparing to use blood magic. Ashe. His body explodes in flames, incinerating the camp and the guards in a wave of fiery death. Remember, he's a burner, but this is his last use because the fire consumes Kwame as it gets out of control and he uses his last moments to fight off the guards. Sacrifice. Because the guards began slaughtering children and innocent people, the diviners used their magic to fight back. Their use of the magic here, doubtless it's going to be used as justification for calling magic dangerous, but it's also clearly the only way that they can defend themselves. Because of Kwame's attack, many of the diviners do escape. Zelie realizes that this violence, this use of magic, is the only way to truly fight back against the guards and show them that they have strength. Amari and Zane ride over on Nala, calling to Zelie, but at that moment, someone else's hands grab Zelie away. Even though Zelie is terrified by the violence she's witnessed, she realizes that justified and targeted violence is the only way to fight the oppression of the guards and eventually to bring peace. Chapter 62. Zane and Amari search in vain for Zelie on the scorched, corpse-strewn field. Inan isn't there either, and Amari is forced to consider that he may have betrayed them. Zane breaks down, saying that he failed his parents. He broke his promise to protect Zelie. Amari has chosen to reject her parents and their ways, but she's forced to confront the possibility that her brother, Inan, has not actually changed. Meanwhile, Zane feels like he has let his own parents down by losing track of Zelie, emphasizing his belief that family loyalty should come above all else. Watching Zane mourn and grieve over Zelie, Amari is racked with shame. She wonders how many families her father, King Saren, had destroyed like this, and how much she is to blame. The thought blows her mind. She tells Zane the guards likely took Zelie to a nearby fortress. She knows her father. And she has a plan to break in. She will be strong. Even though she's rejected her father's views, Amari still feels responsible for the pain he's caused because of their shared blood. She decides that the only way to truly renounce and reject her connection to her father is by directly fighting him. Chapter 63. Zelie is chained up with magicite in a dark chamber. She thinks of all those who died in vain, including Lacan and Zu. She thinks with horror about whether Inan could have betrayed her after all they've been through. But then Inan walks in, flanked by guards. Her heart sinks, thinking that he is responsible for her fate. For Zelie, the many deaths and injuries that accumulated over the course of their quest were justified by the larger goal of bringing peace and restoring magic to Orisha. However, if those goals are not met, then their friends simply died for no reason, which is a horrifying thought. Inan orders the guards to leave. When they do, his face immediately changes. He says the guards discovered the encampment when some diviners went to a nearby town to buy supplies, so he didn't betray her after all. He says he doesn't have much time, and Zelie has to tell him how he can destroy the scroll. Otherwise, Saren will kill her. Inan's revelation that he didn't betray the diviner encampment seems to suggest that he has stayed strong in his decision to break away from his father, King Saren. But then his request that Zelie tell him how to destroy the scroll suggests the opposite. It seems that he is intent on destroying magic just as his father is. Zelie cannot tell if Inan is more loyal to his father or to his own morals. Zelie knows that destroying the scroll won't solve anything. Saren won't stop until he's wiped out the diviners entirely. Now, she says she will die before revealing anything. The soldiers killed all those children and nothing else matters. For Inan, the feeling of grief is overpowered by fear. Inan says that Kwame took out 3 platoons in an instant, confirming the monarchy's worst fears about the magic. Inan says that Kwame took things too far. He says they can't give people that kind of power. Zelie says she can't believe what she's hearing. King Saren enters, overwhelming Zelie in the prison cell with memories of the raid, where her mother was killed 11 years ago. But her desire for vengeance outweighs her fear. She knows he is at the core of hate and oppression in Orisha. Saren asks if she killed Kaya, or knows who did. Zelie thinks about revealing Inan, but his terror stops her. Saren tells Inan that when Saren was young, he believed young diviners could be allowed to live. He thought the raid would leave them afraid and obedient. Zelie yells that Saren has murdered and exploited her people, thinking they would never fight back. But now they are. Saren says that his own father fought for the Magi's rights, and they burned his family. Chapter 64 now. Saren calls in a doctor who injects a serum into Zelie's neck while Inan watches, horrified. Saren says it is to keep her from passing out while they torture her. The soldier tears the back of Zelie's dress and begins to heat his dagger over the flames of a torch. The knife sears into Zelie's back, a pain so intense that Inan can also feel it. He runs forward and attempts to fight off the guards. Saren scoffs at Inan, mocking his son, who feels the sting of his father's disappointment. The guards pull Inan out of the room just as he realizes the soldiers are carving the word maggot onto Zelie's back. Desperate, Inan snaps into the dreamscape. He needs to bring Zelie there to save her from the pain. Zelie appears, but she seems to not know where or even who she is. Crying, she says she can't feel anything. Watching Zelie, Inan thinks of Saren's lesson or refrain, duty before self. He thinks of Kwame bursting into flames. He realizes he must prevent destruction at all costs. In chapter 65, Zane and Amari, they slip through the town of Gombe, where the guard fortress is located. Remember, you can see that in the inside cover of your book where the maps are located. Gombe. Zane knocks on a metal door where a gruff voice asks for a password. The password he knows is out of date. Zane gives him the name of a friend who comes to the door and lets them in. He and Zane are on a rival sports team. Remember that sport they play, Ogbon? Zane masks his fear about Zelie and they step inside the bar. The bar is overflowing with diviners, drinking, having a good time, and only a few Kosidan, the non-magic, all of whom are there with romantic partners who are diviners. Zane says many cities have secret places like this one, where diviners can meet in peace. Zane warns that his friends are loyal, but nervous. They are happy to see him, and there's an air of celebration. Amari interrupts the greetings to say they need help. The group grows serious, as Zane explains. They say there's nothing to be done. The guards are ruthless. Amari shudders to think of the damage that the guards have caused. Amari pulls out the scroll and says that with magic, they can break in. Frightened by the sight of the scroll, 2 of the girls grab Amari and drag her sharply out of the bar. She sees that they are afraid more than angry, and she reveals her identity as princess. She also says that she is the future queen of Orisha, deciding in that moment she must circumvent the line of succession to gain the throne over Inan. Magic has been demonized so much by the king's monarchy that just the mention of it makes the diviners afraid. Saren has effectively forged a link between the practice of magic and ruthless acts of oppression, convincing diviners that any attempt on their part to regain power would result in certain death. Amari holds up the scroll and says that seizing magic is the only way for the diviners to fight back against Saren and avoid being killed themselves. But first, they must save Zelie. Chapter 66. Inan feels Zelie's pain like a lingering presence. He enters King Saren's office and he sees that his father is calm and collected. Harming Zelie is all in a day's work for him. Because she is a magi, her death doesn't mean anything to him, just as the deaths of those in the encampment don't mean anything. Saren says that Inan disgraced him, expecting Inan to cower in fear. But for once, Inan talks back, saying that the interrogation was useless and cruel. Surprisingly, Saren takes it as a sign that Inan has grown during his travels. Saren says they must go to these lengths to keep the kingdom safe. All the other kingdoms fell when they didn't keep magic in check. He says he needed to break the maggot, Zelie, and then she told him everything he needed to know. The scroll can only be destroyed with magic. He's kept her alive for now, so she can be the one to destroy it. Saren says that Zelie deserves to be killed because she killed Kaya. He holds up a turquoise crystal, one of the ones that appeared in Kaya's hair after she died. He says that Amari must also be killed for her role in Kaya's death. After they kill Zelie, says Saren, they will parade her body around Dorisha to put down any thoughts of rebellion. He says there's no other way because magi are dangerous. Saren gives Inan an unexpected and unwanted hug, and Inan remembers when he hurt Amari as a child, those scars on their back. His father told him being able to hurt her would make him a great king. Words that had made Inan happy as a kid. Inan's success in hunting down the scroll now has proven to Saren that Inan will indeed be a good ruler. In some ways, it's all Inan's ever wanted, but all he can think about is Zelie. In chapter 67, late at night, Inan sneaks into Zelie's cell. Zelie is bloodied and almost lifeless, in chains. Inan wonders how Saren can think the Magi are animals when he behaves this way himself. Inan unlocks her restraints and he carries her to the hall. Rescues her? Though they hear the guards, Inan presses on, knowing he must save her. Suddenly, there's shouting and heat as an explosion bursts through the wall. Saren's prejudice is built on a foundation of dehumanizing the diviners, portraying them as less than human. But Inan believes now that acts of senseless violence are what makes someone less than human, not their identity as a diviner. Inan's love for Zelie has helped him to see the many flaws in his father's beliefs and question the blind loyalty that he had for his father in the past. In chapter 68, the fortress is heavily patrolled by guards. Amari, Zane, and Zane's friends from the bar dash towards the walls. After touching the scroll, 3 of them gained abilities that they can use to fight. One uses the ability to manipulate metal to create an opening in the fortress wall, and then close it behind them before any of the guards see. The group has broken into the armory. When a guard enters, Amari presses a blade to his neck and gets him to say where Zelie's cell is. She feels surprised by the venomous anger in her voice. It reminds her only of her father, Saren. An explosion echoes from elsewhere in the fortress, drawing the guards. The other diviners from the bar, wanting to help the cause, created makeshift explosives to use as a distraction. I assume they used blast powder, not gunpowder. Using their various powers in sync, the various magi in the group fight their way through the guards who remain in the hall. Amari surges forward, thinking of how close Zelie is. Suddenly, Saren appears, flanked by guards. He's enraged when he sees his daughter, Amari. But for the first time, she feels strength and bravery. She feels unafraid to use her sword if need be. She feels a righteous anger, thinking of Binta and all the other magi who've suffered and died because of this man. She prepares to strike, but Zane's voice calls her back to attention. He reminds her that they need to go. Amari turns her attention back to finding Zelie. In chapter 69, Inan watches as soldiers fall to magic around him. Terrified, he thinks it's a slaughter rather than a fair fight. He feels Saren was right. If magic is allowed to return, the kingdom will fall to slaughter and chaos. Inan sees magic being used for fighting and thinks that it confirms his long-held fear. Magic always leads to violence. Although he does not wish to slaughter and oppress diviners in the same way that his father does, his fear of magic nonetheless brings him in closer alignment with his father's beliefs. Inan is now determined to stop magic, but he also must save Zelie. He realizes that the magi breaking in will head to Zelie's cell to try to find her, so he heads there. Inan is stopped short by the sight of Amari, wielding a sword with confidence. The Amari he knows would never fight. Inan hands Zelie to Zane, who is devastated at the sight of the slur, maggot, carved into his sister's back. As they leave, Inan says he must try to help them from inside the monarchy, since King Saren does not yet know that Inan's allegiance has shifted. Privately, he thinks that his mission to destroy magic is just beginning. Chapter 70. Zelie feels nothing but pain and guilt. Seeing Zane's face, she thinks that her injuries are hurting him like watching the raid did. She can no longer feel magic, and without it, performing the ceremony will be impossible. A girl who touched the scroll uses her new power to knit together the wounds on Zelie's back, and she falls into a deep sleep. Even though she can be stubborn, Zelie takes her commitments to her family, both her biological family and her new adopted one, with Amari and Inan, very seriously. She worries that her own injuries are hurting them. Zelie finds herself once again in the dreamscape. Inan approaches her gingerly, and all Zelie can think is she can't reveal how much Saren has broken her. Does she have any power left? She sees pity in his eyes, and it makes her furious. Wanting to forget the scars on her back, she pulls him into a kiss. He's hesitant, but she's insistent. Yet, when she closes her eyes, all she can think of is Saren's torture. But she wants to stop thinking about it, and she pulls him closer. End of chapter 70. This is Mr. Spencer, signing off.